Hi, welcome to another episode of Coffee and Codeless with me, Gary Hoberman. And today I've got Bob Pick with me today. Now, Bob, as I mentioned, this might be a new record for us here. Um, I've met many people who've come from different backgrounds before technology. You've been in technology for the last 30 years, currently EVP and Chief Information Officer for Tokio Marine North America, is it in Philly you're
Yep.
based?
Yes, sir.
But I've never met anyone with a background like yours before they entered technology 30 years ago. Like this is to me, you meet people in marketing. I was marketing, but historic preservation planning and archaeology. The first thing I saw when I said historic preservation planning was it's about legacy code. It's legacy migration. Like it's the perfect, I never thought about it. It's probably the perfect, for today's world where we live in with technical debt, it's probably the best title to have, but you gotta tell us your story, like back up a little bit and tell us 30 years ago and what got you into technology. And for those watching, if you have questions for Bob, definitely throw that in the chat, the comments, but please take it away, Bob.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Gary. It's a weird world. I have the wrong degrees to do anything I've ever done for a living. I've never made a living at anything other than technology, but I got into it very obliquely. Rolling way back, my dad, who's still alive, he's 84, just turned 84, computer programmer going back to the late 50s. So in the late 70s, he made sure my older brother and I knew how to program on an Atari 800, starting with
Yeah.
GW Basic and Logo. But the other cartridge he bought was assembly language. So my very first computer book was Machine Language for Beginners by Compute Books, which I still have, spiral bound red cover. And I won't say I was ever really hacking assembler, but that's, he would regale us with stories as to why we shouldn't use any more than one character for a variable name, all that sort of stuff when we were 10, 11 years old. Then I skipped about 15 years, and I went to a small liberal arts college, got a degree in history, political science, a minor in secondary education. I wanted to be a high school history teacher until I started doing classroom teaching practicums, and I realized that I hate children. So that wasn't going to work.
What age? Wait, high school you
High
said, or
school,
what?
yeah, just the most reprehensible human beings. So I said, aha, I still want to teach, so I will be a college professor. And what was an area of interest for me? Well, architectural history was always there. I ran a pool company through undergrad and a little bit in grad school. So building things was always part of it. So I found a program at Cornell that was historic preservation planning. It's part of the city and regional planning program, focused on old stuff. My dissertation advisor, guy named Michael Tomlin, who's still at Cornell, great guy, just really, really kind of gets everybody into the subject. So that was architectural history, landscape architecture history, some architectural design, archaeology, all those different things. But along the way, there was also geographic information systems, and the web was invented. And so in 1993, and I'd always dabbled with computers, 1993 picked back up the computer bug and put up one of the earliest websites at Cornell for historic preservation. Michael was also very much a technology nerd, so he kind of footed the bill as I was playing with things. And that website actually celebrates its 30th anniversary this year in December, which is obviously 100 iterations from what it was. But and then when I went through my master's, got that, stayed on for the PhD coursework, did a year of PhD reading, but realized after the coursework that I had to make a living. And so at that time, this is 95, 96, you could still sort of will yourself into a technology career. So I read a bunch of those really thick books, Visual Basic, Fox Pro, C++, and found a company, an early online banking company that was nice enough to look at my code listings and say, hey, you seem to know how to program, and we've only got 50 other people, so let's give it a shot. And boom, I had a career. So it's that simple.
Well, do you remember the interview? What was the interview they did back then?
The
That's
Yeah, and I had two offers. One was from IIT Technology Institute to do some what they call rapid application development, RAD design in Visual Basic. But both of the interviews with them and with OCC were the same. And that is, you literally brought in code listings and screenshots. Now, what gave me the leg up is that I wasn't just showing them Visual Basic and Fox Pro or Access, whatever it was, but I actually had screenshots of my websites and some HTML listings, which neither of these companies were even doing any of that. It was so new. So they said, "Oh, this is interesting," and so I ended up picking the online banking. It just seemed, I don't know, more fruitful at the time. And then I transitioned over to Price Waterhouse, audit side, then consulting, and then into media. And then 10 years ago, ended up at Tokio Marine doing the glory of commercial insurance. So all good.
It's the most complex out of everything, right? It is definitely the most. There is no question about that. I think my first real job, Bankers Trust, I was reminded of the interview was like they gave you an assignment and you had to sit in front of a computer and build it.
Yeah.
And you had 45 minutes to actually code it and build it. And those were the days in person. And wow,
I
that
did,
was
I did have a couple of interviews that were more that required a little bit more evidence, but it was all pencil and paper. Write a SQL statement that will do this, that sort of stuff. There's no online anything. It was just talk your
it
way
was
through
just
it. So
and
thankfully,
you described the book collection which I had. I mean, every aspects of that, the MSDN books, the VB
right,
books, the C++,
absolutely.
all those, the big thick books,
Yeah, and
the
the more you had
O'Reillys.
behind you, the more legit you were. So it
That's
was like
exactly
it was a
it.
way to
Yes.
project competence without actually having it.
I love it. I love it. So I gotta ask, like the background preservation, like still passion for you? Like, is this
It
something you, yeah,
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's something I enjoy, and myself, I think a lot of us in technology love to tinker and build things. So some folks become car gals and guys. I'm more of a furniture woodworking guy, so I continue with that. And if I had my druthers and I'm in good shape in retirement, I'd love to pivot back into that because I think it's not only is it a fascinating vocation to go through the historical build environment and have an influence on how it's preserved, but it also is a nice tithe to the community. You're saving things that are worthy of being saved, that should be kept safe for future generations. So there's a little bit of the tug in the heartstrings that also factors into it. But tinkering is certainly a big part of it too.
I love it. I always think I used to teach after work, and I always said like that's one day in retirement. That's what I would go back to is to teach college. I was teaching college. High school. I would agree with you. I would probably hate every single kid in that class, and it's anyone with kids. You understand how hard it is.
Brutal.
So brutal, and you definitely like we were talking like your first paycheck or what you would have made was what 20 to 30s, what was the range you actually would start at, which will
I think
shock people?
right. It
Yeah.
was it was I think coming out, and this is with a master's degree from a great school and all this other stuff. I think my original before I moved to Price Waterhouse, I want to say it was 39 or 42. It was one or two of those.
Wow.
And it was a
Wow.
great salary. I was over the moon with that. And it also included a bunch of options. It was a startup, so you know how that goes. But that was a great salary. I was so tickled with it. And it is amazing to think back. I do think there's much more rigor in the technology world now in terms of expectation around certifications. But as you can probably tell in our conversations, I'm a big believer that it takes trained engineers who can do
Yes.
that deep mechanical thinking in a way that is appropriately linear and nonlinear. It takes creative types, and I believe the liberal arts folks like me who come in provide some helpful nonlinearity in that we don't have all the rigor where we learn how to do it through the pedagogical process. A lot of us figured it out along the way, so maybe it's imperfect, but it throws a little creativity into the process. And then I have to also say the military gals and guys who come into it give that great sense of clarity of purpose and urgency. It's those four groups that I find in tech bring so much interest to solving problems and building products.
That's fast. Can I ask you your innovation groups?
Mhm.
I've seen all aspects of innovation in companies, whether it's centralized or whether it's decentralized or whether it's what's your view within innovation teams itself? How should it be done? How is innovation in a company?
Yeah,
materialize?
it's a great question, and for those listening who are not familiar with Tokyo Marine Group, Tokyo Marine is a 144-year-old Japan-based insurer. We're one of those quiet companies that few have heard of outside of Japan, but we're $50 billion operating in almost 50 countries with about 50,000 employees. Our second largest
Wow.
market is the U.S., so we're all over the place, and we've got pretty good scale. But one of the ways we've grown a couple different ways, but a primary way we've grown is through acquisition. And our approach to acquisition is to buy companies that are performing, that are doing well, and let them do their thing. So we don't do crazy things by homogenizing and forcing everyone into one mold. This then follows through in innovation, where over the last few years, we've created a kind of a veil across it and connectors among the group companies to facilitate innovation, meaning what one group company succeeds or fails at is now shared with other group companies. But we still allow most of that experimentation, not only allow it, encourage that experimentation to happen at our individual companies across markets around the world. And part of the power of that is that markets are regulated in different ways for different purposes, and we have many different products. So, what our team at Tokyo Marine Brazil is able to do with the type of regulation in that market allows for extreme creativity. For example, in mobile apps, we brought one of the first super apps to the Brazil market in any industry, and they were able to plow forward in that way that would have been more difficult for us in the U.S. or in Europe to pursue that. Our Singapore group has a great lab that does a lot of innovation, but the idea is we try and provide connectivity as well as some encouragement, some funding along the way, but really foster market specific innovation so that we have a very broad surface area of the types of emerging tech and emerging solutions that may or may not be tech that we test. So we have innovation teams within most of our group companies. We have innovation labs set up for
Wow.
specific purposes around the world. Most of them are research, trying to find solutions and bring them over. If one of our companies has great experience with Uncork, we want to make sure our other companies are aware of it and we're not repeating the same mistake or the same POCs, that kind of stuff. And then over top of that, we do have a venture fund, the Tokyo Marine Future Fund, that's operated out of Japan. And we have what's called a digital acceleration team that really kind of powers this communication and efficiently driving conversations with potential partners and potential solutions around the world. So it's multifaceted. It's not one size fitting all within Tokyo Marine Group.
Yeah, I asked Bob because you are when I look at our clients. First off, thank you for letting us. We did a press release with you, and thank you for Tokyo Marine and having that done. I mean, just sharing the knowledge because most customers don't allow that. We really appreciate when they do, and that's. But you move faster than almost every carrier we've seen on the carrier side. There is no, which is why I ask around. There's a drive, and a lot of times innovation is in pockets, and it can't even if it has the right idea, the right product, the right solution, the business doesn't buy into it,
Right.
and it's almost seen as this foreign object. But within Tokyo Marine, I mean, the work we're doing, I'm fascinated about the speed and what you've achieved. It's just amazing. And as you said, it seems like the business and technology are kind of one and the same, one
Yeah.
vision. And
It,
there,
I was just going to say there is some variance depending upon the region of the group because we have different needs, and the regulated nature of what we do requires a degree of rigor that just is a must have. We have to have the controls in place. We can't just throw things into production. But I would say as a family of companies, we've spent a good amount of time over the last few years really really focused on business technology digital alignment, or I should say business and technology alignment through digital. And so I think that's begun to bear some fruit. And once again, it's uneven and we're not claiming to have anything solved. But I think because we've left certain of these activities distributed, it does give us the ability to not hold ourselves up with sheer weight and scale and all that. The flip side is we do want to make sure that our learnings are shared and where we're having great success and we have great relationships, those are shared. And admittedly, where we see challenges, that's shared as well. And I think that's the part that we're really still working on.
I love the concept. So each group could move individually as fast as they can per market specifics. The Brazil example is great. They could move faster, they could do things, but then bring it back into the learning. Like that's great for any company watching here, anyone watching. That's a great story. What, Bob? I got to ask. Like also 30 years through the leadership to get to where you are. Like what do you teach your team members? How do you bring them? What is the recommendations you've given them over the years that you think is most valuable for them as a leader?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's always changing because some of it depends upon the context and what I happen to have learned that week, where I tripped that week. But starting out with a tech startup in online banking, then going to an audit firm, and then I spent 12 years in media, which is patently unregulated and very freewheeling, and then to come 10 years ago now into a highly regulated international group of companies. It's a lot of different lenses, but I think to boil it down, I'm a firm believer in a sense of humor, because if everything is serious, then nothing is serious. And we have to have grades of seriousness. And I think for the most part, it comes across as well intended. But I think just understanding and contextualizing things and making sure that we're focused on the things that matter and we're not sweating the small stuff where it's not really moving us forward. I think that's a key thing. The other piece is most of my career has been in shared services. So back in the media days, we were a shared services entity that provided support to about 30 different companies. And with Tokio Marine Group, we provide support at Tokio Marine North America to about 6 or 7 different companies. So it creates a little bit of a consulting-like flavor in the day-to-day. We have to think about the company I'm talking to and what its goals are, what its nomenclature, what its hot buttons are, and then pivot to the next one. And there's some artfulness around that. But I think whether you're in a shared services company, consulting or not, learning how to engage with business such that the conversations you're having are primarily business conversations, secondarily tech, even when the topic is tech. And I'm not claiming to have mastered that. It's a continual process, but I think that's a key one. And luckily, insurance is full of really smart folks. And I would also argue, I was actually just talking about this the other day with our chief architect, who also came in from outside insurance. Insurance is unusually populated with people who are willing to answer questions. So if you go up and say, I'm not a lifelong insurance person, I don't understand how we rate this particular type of product and line of business, 9 times out of 10, you'll find someone who will patiently answer that question. That is not the case in other industries I've been a part of. So ask the questions if you don't know. If you don't know something, say with pride, I don't know, but make the commitment to go find out. I think that's the key. And the final thing I'll mention is we've had the blessing of great stability in our team at Tokio Marine North America, both our employee team and our partners. So we leverage a substantial number of outsourced relationships to manage our systems beyond system integration work. And we've been really blessed with stability there. So trying to treat our people well in every possible way, but especially in their development as professionals and as people is key. So supporting not just the training, but the degrees, the certs, training and adjacencies, I call it, as well as, very importantly, a diagonal career path, not just vertical and horizontal. Having that lattice is key, because if you can't keep stability in your folks who learn more and more about our business every year, it's going to be incredibly difficult to succeed. So that's another thing that I try and counsel to focus a lot on.
I love the concept of career mobility, internal mobility. We focus so much on hiring external, but it's the team's internal. You've invested already. You're right. They already have the knowledge. They've invested. Move them up, move them over. Like that's amazing. And the knowledge. I always said I felt like my tech team should know the business better than the business.
Mhm.
And I even offended a few business CEOs when I made that comment. Is they said, "Why would you need to? What would?" And it's like, and it was an argument. And I'm like, well, like we should understand when you're asking us to do something, is it the right approach to
Mhm.
take to do it? And how would we do it best? And like, like that, I love the model. And then the last thing I really like is do it with a sense of humor, because
Mhm.
there's so much in life outside of work which is challenging, and everyone has their own things they're battling and every single day. And if work could actually be something which is enjoyable at those times when it's actually easy, and put it in context. And then the times when it's difficult, get everyone involved and jumping in the right direction as fast as they can. We have to be able. It's a great. I love that recommendation. That's awesome, Bob. That's Bob. Where is you're an advisor in many technology companies, helping them lead the way. Where do you see technology going? What's the future in specialty, future insurance? Where do you and then we'll get to Gen AI. Leave out the Gen AI for
Okay.
now, but in general, what's exciting to you outside of that? And we'll get to the Gen AI in a second.
Yeah, I think, and I've done some talking on this in the last couple quarters. I think insurance specifically gets a very bad rap, largely from analysts who don't sit inside insurance about being technology luddites or everything's ancient or we're just not doing. The reality is, coming in from outside the industry, I've been so impressed across, and I'm talking property, casualty, life and annuity, health, and some of the other hangers on, at the pace of adoption of new technology in the face of and in the context of highly regulated,
Yes.
meaning we can't just throw things in. But the trick is, a lot of that until the last few years has been on the back end. So it's back
Yep.
office stuff. It's in our core systems. It's not things necessarily that a policy holder, whether it's a personal policy or your business policy or an agent, will see. In the last few years, there's definitely been more of a focus on that UX CX, the things that are externalized. COVID accelerated this. If you're not everything, check, signature, this, that, you're doomed. COVID
Mhm.
made that kind of pushed that to the fore. If you don't have appropriate portals, if you don't have appropriate connectivity, or at least you're not in the process of doing that, integrations with agency management systems, for example. But insurance companies have been doing these things for years, but it's been difficult to see. So we would take these drubbings by every analyst outside and sometimes ourselves. I think we're finally realizing that, you know what, we're on the right track with a lot of stuff. Yes, of course, we wish we could move certain things along faster or they were simpler. But the reality is, a policy administration system that services 100 products is absolutely empirically not a simple thing. So we have to address that. But I think the thing that I would mention, I'll try not to drone on, is that 20, 30 years ago, insurance companies were known for having giant mainframe systems, these monolithic core systems. So you had one policy admin system that did every possible thing around policy. You had a claim system that did every possible thing around claims. And then in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, a number of great solutions came up that allowed us, number one, to take that client server, multi-tier, and eventually cloud. But number two, allowed us to kind of disaggregate that a little bit. But many of those solutions have become just better architected, modern architected monoliths. And what I see happening now with the I'll say the incumbent core system providers and a whole bunch of new solutions coming up in the insurtech space over the last 5 years is the ability to get back to assembling solutions that aren't necessarily all tied to one particular system or thing, so that we can get the best. We can layer things or we can componentize things, and we can get the best solution for our unique needs or our market. And I really feel that that's the future. People a lot smarter than I have said that enterprise architecture is a lot more about assembly than building. And I do believe that. But the thing I'll add to that, which is a corollary I threw in at a chat at InsurTech Connect last year, is that I also think, in addition to that, that a return to doing really hard engineering is also part of it. Because sometimes, in order to enable what are these existing systems to play well with others, you got to do the hard stuff. If you have the right, sometimes you even got to crack open code. You got to modernize middleware, those sorts of things. And these are things, as an industry, we generally try and stay away from. But I think it's part of it. And so as we go forward, generally not talking about generative AI or specifics, I think that's a trend. It's assembly of solutions, but also being able and willing to do engineering work to make it all work flawlessly together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, to me, it's about the best. In our world, we say there's an abstraction layer that's needed because in reality, you don't know who the winners are going to be just yet. It's never going to be one. It's going to be multiple solutions. But how do you create the experience to get advantage now? So it's single glass, single experience, single view, allowing you to then address, as you said, the complex stuff, the things that I mean, every time we tried in the past to do a mainframe migration, it was always You either tried to convert it automatically, which seemed like a dream, which today is different. With generative AI, actually, I would say it's first time I'm more optimistic. But in the past, you'd get back unusable code you couldn't use, or the cost of migrating it would never make sense. It was not a business case. And I think it's finally, I think to your point, it's finally to the point to say the legacy has to be addressed by hardcore engineering, open it up, address it, enable it, and it's not just a single monolithic solution. It's going to be multiple solutions. I really like the idea of setting it up in like a plug and play model where you could snap in and out. Like that would be the ideal. But now get back to generative AI. So you must have 100 business cases from your businesses saying, "Hey, here's all the ways we use generative AI." And when you mention regulations, for those who, when I entered insurance in 2012 after 20 years in banking, I was shocked to learn there were 15,000 state regulators that, 50 different states, 35 are compact states that try to operate at one, but they don't. New York, whatever everyone else does, New York will say the opposite, and then California will just look at New York and swap it. And so you've got 15,000 employees, full-time employees in the US that do nothing but regulate you. And they tell you, like, that's what you're dealing with. That's the complexity. So with that, like with the balance of the regulators, and then you've got this generative AI thing coming up. What's your views on it? I'd love to hear.
Well, and it's, you got to remember Guam, Puerto Rico, and DC too. So it's more than
Oh,
50.
you're right. Oh, you've got much more than 50. And I didn't include the FSA in Japan, which is,
Right.
of course, the other one you've got there, which is huge.
Well, and I
Yeah.
will say, rolling back to the cyber topic, NYDFS, New York Department of Financial
Yeah.
Services, which put out some landmark regulation in that space. Honestly, I have to credit the regulators. They really have caught up and are able to turn things around as it relates to IT technology matters much more quickly. And quite frankly, it's helpful because the longer or the longer the period of mystery as to what a regulation might be exists, the
Yes.
greater the risk for everybody. So even if the regulation is slightly imperfect or it's not what you or I would, the way we would put it, if it's out there, at least we know the goal and at least we can react to it and eventually proact on the basis of it. So I got to put that out there. But as it relates to generative AI, and this is a great example because we're in that window of where in the US market, there's very, very little regulation or legislation on that. European Union has its AI Act that recently came out, so it's creeping along. But it puts us in a bit of a no person's land as to exactly where the limits are. That said, I think
Yeah.
clearly, without going through all of generative AI risks as it relates to insurance, there are a couple of key ones that are really crucial for insurance that we need to keep in mind. The biggest is drift. So in insurance, we have to show our work. So we can't just say we underwrote this at this price and that's it. We have to be able to show all the different factors, the evidence behind it, and have that underwriting file ready to go. And not just today, but 5 or 7 years from now, when a Department of Insurance comes back and says, all right, folks, let's
Yes.
show that. So the fact that LLMs, it's difficult to freeze them. It certainly is challenging to get the same answer to the same prompt multiple times in a row. We have to solve that for insurance purposes. And in addition to that, I'd say that's a key data related one, but we also have the risk of making sure that the data privacy for our policyholders, and not just their personal data, but all the stuff around it is sacrosanct. And not just because it's a risk if it's breached, but because we have to really capture and understand the data to be able to control for bias, to be able to control for toxicity, to be able to attest to the veracity and completeness of the data that we're using in these business decisions. I'm making this up, but if you're in media and you're selling advertising, there's no regulator who's going to come in and say, oh, it's bad data, whatever. In insurance, that's all day long. So we have to be careful with it. But we do have, and I think every carrier company out there has dozens and dozens of use cases, and we're using that same innovation model. So we're trying different things out at different markets. We're sharing that information. We have some great partners that we're involved with that we're working on proofs of concept. But clearly the promise is great. I think we, like many carriers, are of the opinion that we're not going to run with anything straight into production, that it's mostly advisory or co-pilot, if you will, not in the trademark sense, but co-pilot, where we provide advice to a human being, but it's the human being that has the responsibility and accountability for reviewing and making those decisions, but where we can speed things along, create those summaries. And as you and I have been talking, especially in the tech space, where I can
Yes.
do code archaeology on something that was built 25 years ago, everyone's retired and there's no documentation, where I can create draft requirements from code, where I can create test data sets on the basis of what's in code. It may not be 100% perfect, may only be 50% there, but that leaves only 50% for the humans to do. Amazing potential that is lower risk than putting something out to market. This is the area of regulation that is not policyholder data related. Very, very bullish on what we're going to be able to do there in the next couple of years.
Yeah, to me, it's the most exciting thing of the regulators is I think we'll start to see them push the age of technology as a risk. And I'm starting to see it in banking, and banking's always had insurance, but in banking, I think we're starting to see regulators start to question why there's still mainframes in certain places and how many COBOL programmers and assembler programmers. By your point of assembler, how many people still have that book of how to program assembler?
Right.
And what is it? Moves and pushes? Is that what it is? I think if I remember it right.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and so like that's going to be a risk that will have to be addressed. And I think generative AI reversing that into English and understanding and requirements. And I agree with you completely. Even if it's only 50% there, and then 50% is human after it, it's huge opportunity. I love it. That is exciting. Bob, this is incredible to have you as a partner friend, like just to do this with us is thank you so much. Any last words of wisdom, any books you're reading, anything exciting, like what, give us one more piece, morsel and like, yes, anything.
I will say all the predictions of post-COVID business travel dying are untrue. So there's one for you. No, I mean I think like many, I wake up every morning and I have news sources and I have treasure troves of lists and links that come in that you just read up. And I think a lot of it is generative AI that comes in these days. But again, the key for us, and I think a lot of folks in insurance, what we're doing is recognizing that the days of giant rip it all out core system transformations are probably behind us for a variety of reasons. And it's really about elevating what you have where you can, getting it all to play better together, and then finding great partners who either have unitasker solutions or multitasker solutions. But to your earlier point, creating a framework in your ecosystem where you can bring things in as they rise in the market, as they make sense, and in fairness, where they no longer make sense, you can easily jettison them. So looking and constantly kind of trolling for that type of information, and also kind of validating or invalidating that that's an appropriate approach. That's really what the types of things that I get into. That and reading all sorts of books on not just generative AI, but classic AI, and elements that are way over my head. But I mouth the words enough, and eventually I figure it'll come around.
I love it. When I entered MetLife, Bob, there was a program when I started there as CIO that it was in year 5 of year 7 in a migration project. I'm assuming you've seen these because I love the knowledge you're sharing.
Well, that's my joke. Coming in from media, if I had 5 weeks or even 5 days to do a project, and I come into insurance and I hear about these 5-year, 8-year, 9, holy moly. Now I understand a little bit more about why that still happens sometimes, and it's totally legit. But talk about a change in a frame of reference.
I love it. I love it. Bob, this is so much fun. We could go for hours and hours. And I just appreciate, again, being a partner and a client and a friend and just joining us here today. And thank you for everything, Bob.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
Okay. See you everyone next time. Thanks
All
again.
right.
Take care. Bye-bye.